Broadcasting from the heart of the nation, the next generation in conservative talk radio. This is the Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier.
Why, yes it is. What is up, my friends? Welcome into it. It is your Monday, the greatest day of the entire week, as we are setting that tone, ready to rock and roll for a whole nother one. Welcome aboard, your Millennial General doing his thing.
Do it live!
Like we do every single day. So great to have you here as we get ready. I'm telling you, man, there's so much news from this weekend, and today there is zero way that we're going to cover as much as we can into this hour. But like usual, we will cram that 10 pounds of reason into that 5-pound bag, trying to rebrand the Millennial Generation, one radio listener at a time. Let's do it, baby. Broadcasting right here in the heart of the nation, in Wichita, Kansas, our flagship radio station, but we are all over the country, multiple great stations, TV, live streaming, podcasting. Again, let's do the thing.
Do it live!
Each and every day. Bottom of the hour, we have Gates Garcia on the program. He is a contributor to The Blaze and the host of the We the People podcast. We're going to chat with him about some of the flavors of the day and get his thoughts about the future of conservatism. Are we moving in the right direction? What does the future of conservatism and the movement actually look like? The young generation jumping on board and more. So we'll get to all that in just a little bit. First and foremost, hope everybody had a great weekend. It was Happy Mother's Day, post-Mother's Day weekend. To all the moms out there, we had a segment on the Weekend Syndicated program talking about mothers and how nowadays, apparently, it's a controversial thing to say Happy Mother's Day to a biological mom. I know. So we talked about the identity politics, and I guess caused a stir on social media, also posting an issue about how we're not going to look at trans women on Mother's Day, but we're going to look at actual moms. You know, the actual biological women that can really produce children, that have produced every child on the face of the earth since the existence of mankind. That would be real biological women, and for that, we are saluting you this past weekend, because your identity has been tried to take away to become no longer a woman or a mother, but a birthing person. And I'm not okay with that. So happy Mother's Day. Hope you had a great weekend. We definitely treated Mrs. Voice of Reason the best we could to give her a day off. We watched some movies, had to enjoy, and spent some quality family time. And I know that's what she was looking forward to. So all in all, it was a great weekend. While in between all of that, trying to keep up with all the news, man. We covered the best that we could on the weekend, which, as you know, we are only one of the very few live weekend shows that gets to break all the news before anybody else on the normal Monday morning news cycle. So that's kind of awesome for us, and we continue to do that on Saturday afternoons with great affiliates all over the country. And while we were there, we were talking about as it was happening, the ongoing trade negotiations with China and the United States. We didn't have any details of what those details or the conversation looked like with Scott Bessent, however they pronounce it. I think it's Bessent. I like to say Bessent, but I think he calls him Bessent. Regardless, he was there in Switzerland having the negotiations with China at that time, and what we were speculating on what would happen. Well, we got our answer with the headlines going on today.
What's trending today?
After Donald Trump's press conference that he had earlier today, which, can I just say before we play the audio, Donald Trump definitely is the most comfortable guy behind the microphone. He was just there. He was telling stories that lasted well over an hour. He was just telling stories, giving news about India and Pakistan, which I didn't even know there was a conflict out there, but now we have a ceasefire there. He was talking about the trade deals with China. He was talking about the meeting that's apparently going to happen now between Russia and the Ukraine. We'll get to that in a little bit. He was talking about this new executive order that he signed earlier today, which we'll talk about. But he was just having a great old time talking about fat people and shots, and I didn't even know you could mention the word fat people anymore. I thought they were a protected class of victimhood in society now. Right? But that's Donald Trump for you. And as he talked about the Chinese tariffs, this is what he said earlier today.
The talks in Geneva were very friendly. The relationship is very good. We're not looking to hurt China. China was being hurt very badly. They were closing up factories. They were having a lot of unrest. And they were very happy to be able to do something with us. And the relationship is very, very good. I'll speak to President Xi maybe at the end of the week. We have some other things we're doing. But one of the biggest things...
okay, all right, that's not... We don't need to go down the entire direction. But the good news is that we are seeing a reset, a 90-day reset in the tariffs. Apparently, ours are going down to 10%. Theirs are going down to like 3%. So good news across the board, except for specific industries that we really want to bring a lot of that industry back home, some of the manufacturing back on the home front, pharmaceutical pill manufacturing back on the home front. And that's, again, where we lead to what happened today with the executive order. You know we had to go there because I am so excited to talk about it.
What's trending today?
With the medical industry, the big pharma that we're pushing back on, and the Trump administration's push to try and bring pharmaceutical prices back down in the United States with the new executive order that was signed today.
But starting today, the United States will no longer subsidize the health care of foreign countries, which is what we were doing. We're subsidizing others' health care. Countries where they paid a small fraction of what, for the same drug, that what we pay many, many times more for. And will no longer tolerate profiteering and price gouging from Big Pharma. But again, it was really the countries that forced Big Pharma to do things that, frankly, I'm not sure they really felt comfortable doing. But they've gotten away with it, these countries. European Union has been brutal. All
right, so let's break some of that down. What does this actually mean, right?
What Donald Trump really meant to say.
Yeah, we haven't had to play that segment for a while, but what Donald Trump really meant to say. So the executive order signed today, bringing pharmaceutical prices down. Now, if you remember, under the first administration with Donald Trump 1.0, we brought insulin down to $30, $35, whatever it was. When Joe Biden came into office, he removed that executive order. Prices of insulin went back up dramatically to wherever they have been. A couple $100 of insulin, whatever prices are for that. And then Joe Biden tried to bring them back down a second time, but he did it in a completely different way. And he forgot the fact that Donald Trump already solved this problem.
That's right. Donald Trump did that.
But what Joe Biden did with the pharmaceutical prices for the price of insulin, capping it at $35 for per shot or per use of insulin, however you use that, is exactly what's happening with foreign nations as well, because we're spending hundreds of dollars for the average American to spend on a particular specialist pill if you need it, or shot, or whatever it is. While another country, you go over there and you get it for an extremely cheap price. Donald Trump used that analogy with his friend with the fat shot today.
I mean, I'll tell you a story. A friend of mine who's a businessman, very, very, very top guy. Most of you would have heard of him.
Yeah, I'm sure.
A highly neurotic, brilliant businessman, seriously overweight, and he takes the fat shot drug.
Hold on. First, again, in the world of the wokeness, and you can't say particular words, and certain derogatory terms are made in culture now, and you can't use this, you can say this, you can always say. I did not know that fat jokes were now a thing again. And apparently now Donald Trump makes the comment that now he's taking the fat shot. I didn't know you could say that. I thought it was you had to be the life preferred choice of relatively heavier above body mass individuals. But no, he just calls them fat, which, okay, cool. I guess we're getting back to that now.
And he called me up and he said, President, he calls me, he used to call me Donald, now he calls me President, so that's nice respect. But he's a rough guy, smart guy. Very successful, very rich.
All right, John, what do we got?
I wouldn't even know how we would know this, but because he's got comments. President, could I ask you a question? What? I'm in London, and I just paid for this damn fat drug I take. I said, it's not working. He said, I just paid $88. And in New York, I pay $1,300. What the hell is going on?
All right, so let's break that down, shall we? After the very long, fun story that Donald Trump had about fat shots and fat guys that are trying to take these shots, let's break down what he's trying to say here. And this relates to exactly what Joe Biden was doing as well when he tried to bring insulin prices down to $35 per shot because, well, some people were trying to decide the difference between getting their medicine or getting food, and it's way too expensive. This has been a talking point for progressives forever. And RFK mentioned that during his speech today as well during this time, is this has been the entire talking point of Bernie Sanders and most of the socialist Democrats. We need more government health care. We have to get rid of all the insurance companies. We have to do just the universal income and universal health care because that's going to solve it because all these prices are too high. But how did we get to this point? Whether it's the insulin before Joe Biden or when Joe Biden did his cap of the $35, or whether what we're doing with these foreign nations, we're subsidizing it. For example, under the Joe Biden insulin plan, when you went to the pharmacy and you went to the counter and you got your insulin and it was capped at $35, that does not mean that the pharmaceutical company that produced the insulin was only receiving $35 for that insulin shot. It wasn't happening. That's not the way it was going down. No, sorry. What was happening was that you were paying $35 up front over the counter at that moment. The rest of it, however much it was, $200, $150, whatever it was for insulin at that time, the rest of it was being subsidized by the federal government. In other words, the government was paying the rest of the cost to the pharmaceutical company. Big Pharma, they were still getting their top money. They were getting all the money for it, but we were subsidizing it by paying the rest of it. When they talk about we need it through Medishare and we need it through Medicare and Medicaid and all these other government options and all these government programs, that they were paying for the rest of it while you were paying just that short amount over the counter. Now, for some progressives, they'd be like, oh, that's kind of a good deal. All right, I can do that. At the same time, if you understand basic economics, you realize that you've now subsidized and you have distributed your health care costs to everybody else that pays taxes. And if you want to start cutting costs at the federal level, if you want DOGE to take things to an entirely different level, stop subsidizing health care and stop subsidizing pharmaceutical industries. And that's what this executive order does under the Trump administration for the foreign nations, why it's so cheap for these pills elsewhere, and why we were footing the bill to cover the majority of that cost, or why Big Pharma was making these deals to keep it so small there and then keep the price kind of small here as long as our government would subsidize it on that front. We're going to balance that playing field. This new executive order under Donald Trump essentially saying that the United States is only going to pay whatever the cheapest cost is of any other nation around the world. That's it. That's what we're paying, and we're not subsidizing the offset for that rest of that money. Big Pharma is going to lose their minds, man. They don't know how to handle this because they've made so much money for so long. They have dominated the industry. Can you imagine an industry where you can create a business and you can say, I'm going to create a product where I don't have to prove that it's unhealthy or unsafe for anybody whatsoever, either being a pill or a vaccine. All they say, we got to do testing. They do some. But vaccines especially, they really don't do a whole lot because they know that they're not going to have anybody come after them because they're protected. You're not going to get sued for it. So you can make a product that no one is going to come after you for if you make them ill. You get the government to force everybody to have to take these things. You create an entire industry to where anybody, like doctors or nurses, anybody in that industry promotes your product by just handing it off without actually solving issues any further whatsoever. They just tell people that this is what you have to take is buy your product. And oh, by the way, I'm going to get this amount of money. And even though they don't pay that over the counter, don't worry, the government's going to compensate. So I'm going to get it on my end as well. This is what Big Pharma has done to our healthcare, and it's a complete disaster, and it needs a complete reset. And this is the entire talking point of Democrats forever. We're going to get to that when we come back around the corner with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. He made a statement on this issue as well, but this has been a long-term talking point for Big Pharma, for the insurance companies. They're all in cahoots, wanting to keep prices, quote-unquote, as low as possible, but all the backdoor deals that are happening where they're still making massive bank on these profits, and you and I are either paying for it up front over the counter or behind the scenes with our taxpayer money, and it's absolutely ridiculous. The reset's happening now, and I can't wait to see what that looks like, and I cannot wait to see the faces of Big Pharma when they see how all of their goodies and handouts are going to start going away. Lots more coming up. It is a wild Monday. Stay here.
This is the Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier. When reason meets radio. This is the Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier.
This is an extraordinary day. This is an issue that, I grew up in the Democratic Party, and every major Democratic leader for 20 years has been making this promise to the American people. This was the fulcrum of Bernie Sanders' runs for presidency, that he was going to eliminate this discrepancy between Europe and the United States. But as it turns out, none of them were doing it. It's one of these promises that politicians make to their constituents, knowing that they'll never have to do it. And the reason they'll never have to do it is because they know that Congress is controlled. in so many ways by the pharmaceutical industry.
Yeah, it's so true. So Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Secretary for the Department of Health and Human Services, talking during the press conference today. It is so true. Can you imagine? And this is why this is bigger than what we even imagine right now. If this goes through and if this happens the way that we're anticipating for this to happen, the bigly move with the executive order under this Trump administration.
And I think we're going to make it bigly.
To bring these pharmaceutical prices down to the point where they can, Democrats, meaning the progressives, the anti-Trumpers, the ones on the other side of the political aisle, can no longer use the argument of, you have to choose between your medicine or your food this month because of people on set incomes, the ones that are ill. We need to bring these prices down. You've heard these talking points for so long, and it's true in many cases, which is very unfortunate and very sad. But if Donald Trump's plan goes the way that we're expecting it to go, which I really think it does, and we see these prices come down, and Big Pharma takes this major hit, and this is only one step, by the way, of the RFK plan from his health side of it, to get rid of the protections for Big Pharma, to start banning some of the stuff that they're trying to do, to start stopping their research on gain of function and all this other garbage that they're working on, that if we start seeing these policies implemented, Big Pharma is going to lose control over so many people. And I mean, it's going to be devastating to them. But from the talking points of the Democrats, what would they have? What would Bernie Sanders have as Mr. Socialist? We need to complete the FDR agenda. We need to go further to the socialist side. What would he have? What type of agenda could he run on then if he says, well, we need to get rid of the millionaires and billionaires and all the ones that can have good health care and no one else can have good health care because they don't have any money? What could he talk about when we actually have a healthcare system that runs with cheaper pharmaceutical prices under a Donald Trump administration? How many Democrats would actually get on board and be like, wow, Democrats have talked about it for years. Trump actually did it. Look at that. We're actually seeing results. Could you imagine the pendulum, the landslide that we would see in the midterms of 2026 when this starts taking effect and we go into the midterms with Republicans trying to win more seats and gain a leverage? So this is where Republicans in Congress needs to come in. And I know that there is some breaking news right now.
What's trending today?
That it has been confirmed that part of the reconciliation bill, the big, beautiful package they're working on right now, that they have confirmed that the tax relief on American workers with no taxes on tips and no taxes on overtime are now in the big, beautiful package. So, obviously, it's not going through yet. It's not voted on yet, but it is going to be in the bill that they vote on whenever that reconciliation big, beautiful package actually comes to the floor of the House and or the Senate. So we'll see what happens there. But the talking points of the Democrats going away just like that if we see these pharmaceutical prices. Bigger than that, it doesn't matter what Democrats say because we're an action type of party now. We're a Donald Trump getting things done mentality, and to help American citizens, which is the number one priority here outside of just trying to get rid of Democrat talking points, that we're actually helping American citizens that are in dire straits and that need help with their medications. This is what it's going to do. And when pharma loses that revenue, what's their response going to be? If you remember, towards the end of the Trump administration 1.0, and he was on the campaign trail, he had mentioned that he needed to go dark for a little while because he had upset some in the big pharmaceutical industry. And he said openly, I believe at a rally in like Cincinnati or Cleveland or somewhere up there, that they were coming after him. And it was very troubling what he had said. But this is one of the most powerful industries in the world. And Donald Trump is taking them head on and fighting them and limiting their power, and it's kind of fun to watch. We got lots more to cover and so much more with our great guests when we come back around the corner for a Monday here on The Voice of Reason.
This is The Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier. Truth, reason, and common sense. This is The Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier.
In addition, yesterday we achieved a total reset with China after productive talks in Geneva. Both sides now agreed to reduce the tariffs imposed after April 2nd to 10% for 90 days as negotiators continue on the larger structural issues. And I want to tell you that a couple of things. First of all, that doesn't include the tariffs that are already on, that are our tariffs, and it doesn't include tariffs on cars, steel, aluminum, things such as that. or tariffs that may be imposed on pharmaceuticals, because we want to bring the pharmaceutical businesses back to the United States, and they're already starting to come back now based on tariffs.
Yeah, boom, that's a big win. So President Trump making that announcement today. So the China tariffs, a reset for 90 days. That's a big win for us right there. Pat yourself on the back. Yeah, buddy. We made that one happen. And that ties right in with the pharmaceutical conversation we just had as well in the last couple segments of bringing pharmaceutical manufacturing back here, not dependent on Chinese pills. Kind of weird how we allowed that to happen in the first place. And, of course, the executive order he signed today that's not subsidizing the cheaper pills for sending pharmaceuticals all around the world, and then actually making sure that we pay lesser amounts, and not by just subsidizing and just paying the offset to the pharmaceutical company, but actually keeping them low. What a concept, man. Say what? So much to cover today. My brain hurts just trying to keep up with all of it. And that's where it leads us to our next conversation here on the program.
What's trending today?
And to pick his brain and get his thoughts on all this and more, really happy to have on. He is a contributor to The Blaze. He's the host of the We the People podcast and so much more. Happy to have on Gates Garcia. How are you, my friend?
Andy, I'm doing great, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, pleasure to have you on. It is such a wild time to live. I can't keep up with all the news, and it's not like it's even bad news to where we have to be angry and make sure everybody knows about it. We're happy. There's so much good news going on right now.
I think it's a great time to be American. I mean, we have talked about the vibe shift for a while now, and we're done talking about it. We're living it. The culture is shifting in this country, and it's just a fun time to be a part of it.
It is. What does the future look like here? I mean, we look at and talk about the future, the leadership of the Republican Party, the new leadership for the MAGA movement, which, I mean, we're a few years out from that. We don't have to worry about it yet, which is good news. But what Donald Trump's doing right now is a complete reset in the system. Are we going to have to worry about who the leader is going to be after this? Because Donald Trump is going to hit this reset so hard that everybody's going to realize that you can't deny the successes of the Trump administration.
No, I think the future of the conservative movement is rooted, but it's resilient. I mean, the next generation of conservatives looks different, it feels different, and that's because it is different. They're not just concerned with fiscal responsibility, although that's important. They're really hungry. They're hungry for, I think, meaning, community, and truth. Truth isn't a word that we've let roll off our tongues much lately, but we're starting to more. They want to conserve what matters most, and they're bold about it. This isn't about rehashing Reagan-era talking points, and nobody loves Reagan more than me, but it's about standing up to tyranny with conviction, with creativity. I mean, I think of people like Riley Gaines. She's bold, she's articulate, she's unashamed to go around on college campuses and say things that our side hasn't been saying for a while. Young conservatives aren't running from the culture. It seems like they're kind of storming towards it.
Yeah, it's exciting. I mean, being part of the millennial generation myself, I apologize for my generation with all the stupid things that we've done, and we've kind of gotten a bad reputation, but it almost seems like there's been enough conservative millennials and those behind us as well that have really stood up to say that's not who we are, that's not what we're about, and like you said, we're going to take these issues head on, and we will be the ones that can actually pick up the torch and be the fighters for the next generation, and they're not just the AOC types, right?
No. The movement is getting younger. It's getting older. It's getting more creative. I mean, there's a new generation of conservatives who don't care if they're called names. We went through a brief period where name calling really got to everybody, but we're over that. They care about being right with God. They care about being strong with families. They're free from government control, and it feels good. Gen Z influencers are aplenty. Brett Cooper, Isabel Brown, Christian creators on TikTok. I mean, they're showing that conservatism isn't outdated. It's sort of countercultural, and that's exactly what I've been saying for a while on my show. Conservatism is cool, and it's cool again. And these aren't buttoned-up think tanks. They're podcasters in their bedrooms. They're making memes. They're producing documentaries. It's a movement with soul and swagger.
Yeah, well, and it's the rebellious ones again, right? I mean, the younger generation that wants to rebel against the system, that's where we're at now. Leave us alone. Let us be. Let us do our thing. And, I mean, we've tried to reach out to a lot of the libertarians and, people that, go to tattoo shops and have the major gauge earrings and face and neck tattoos that just say, government, leave me the hell alone and let me live my life. That is the rebellious conservative movement right now, I think.
And the way you reach them is meeting them where they are. We were so bad at that for so long, but this sort of new media landscape has allowed allowed us to do that. We finally understand that, if we want to reach the next generation, we've got to go where they are. They're not going to necessarily come to us. You've got to go to YouTube. You've got to go to TikTok, Spotify, Instagram. Right. I love Fox News, but you can't just rely on that. And that's why shows like, Daily Wire's kids content, PragerU, the Babylon Bee, Angel Studios, they're exploding. They're bringing conservative values into places that the left, really took for granted because they thought they had a monopoly on things like entertainment, humor, education. I mean, my show, We the People, we're part of that wave. We speak to the parent in the pickup line, the small-town pastor, the college student tired of woke politics shoved down their throat. I mean, we give them a voice and a vision. It's the first time that, when Elon Musk bought X, he said, we are the media now. And we've taken full advantage of that. We've swept the rug out from underneath the left when it comes to the messages that we're hearing in this country.
Yeah, it's a great point. Let's shift to the other side and speculate on what the platform's going to look like for Democrats moving forward. I mean, obviously, with the executive order today from the Trump administration getting rid of the high costs on pharmaceutical pills, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. said this during that hearing today.
This is an extraordinary day. This is an issue that, I grew up in the Democratic Party, and every major Democratic leader for 20 years has been making this promise to the American people. This was the fulcrum of Bernie Sanders' runs for presidency, that he was going to eliminate this discrepancy.
Yeah, so lowering pharmaceutical prices there. We have the Democrats that used to be the non-interventionalists, don't get involved in foreign affairs. Dick Cheney's just a warmonger kind of mentality we need to pull out, where now Donald Trump is the guy that says we're not going to get in unnecessary conflicts and wars across the world. He's literally taken the Democrat talking points and actually acted upon them. What's the future then of the Democrat Party look like when they can't even use their same talking points for the past 10, 15, 20 years because Donald Trump's already done it?
It's hollowed out. I mean, they've talked a big game for so long, but their policies have finally materialized, and Americans, certainly in the middle class and the center of the country, the flyover states, have realized this isn't working for us. They've duped us. I mean, it's amazing if you look at the demographic shifts of this last election. Americans finally woke up. Let's use the word woke. Maybe we're the woke ones after all. I say that tongue in cheek, but we've woken up and said, wait a minute, these policies, these handouts only go so far. And when you get a handout, you don't learn anything in life. Teach a man to fish, or give a man a fish versus teach a man to fish. Yeah. It goes back to Ronald Reagan. We give hand-ups, not handouts, because the right, the conservative movement, believes that Americans can run their own lives better than the government can, and there's nothing wrong with a little help from institutions, but they can't do the job for you. And Donald Trump has actually emboldened Americans to run their own lives, and it's empowering.
It's very empowering. We're talking with Gates Garcia. He's a contributor to The Blaze. You can also check out his podcast, the We the People podcast, and see all the great content that you guys are working on. You mentioned wokeism, and you're right. I like to say that we are awake and not woke because we have awakened to what the heck's going on, which is nice to see. Is that going to be the detrimental straw that breaks the camel's back on the progressive side? Is this woke identity politics? I got into a massive social media debate yesterday on Mother's Day weekend on what a woman actually was, because we have mothers now that aren't allowed to be called mothers. They are, quote, birthing people, which completely takes away the entire purpose of what a woman actually is. Is this going to be the downfall of the Democrats because they have not learned their lesson from the election yet, especially with the identity politics and the wokeism? They have doubled down, and I cannot see that being anything beneficial for them moving forward.
Americans have finally realized that truth is a good thing, and we've been lied to for so long. We've had the sheets pulled over our eyes to what truth is. Where I think the conservatives have shifted the culture so much is right on the front line. Facts inform, but stories inspire. And that's why the left has spent decades investing in Hollywood, publishing, and the media, and that's why the conservatives are finally doing the same. If you look at movies like Sound of Freedom, Hollywood laughed at it. Then it became a grassroots box office sensation, not because it had $1 billion budget, but because it told a story that resonated with the soul. You look at books like Tuttle Twins. People finally have I don't think that we didn't believe these things and live these things in our own lives, but we didn't have the resources provided to us. And the conservative movement has woken up through storytelling and are finally representing on screens, in the books, on podcasts, the way we live our daily lives. So I think these messages have always been there. They just haven't been provided a microphone to be given to the American people. And finally we say, oh, yeah, this stuff does sound reasonable, and common sense is working, and we just have a mouthpiece now that we didn't have before.
Well, we didn't think we had to have that kind of conversation to sit down with our kids and be like, you are a biological boy versus a biological girl. Do you know the difference? It's weird that we even had to have those conversations. So you're right. I think it was always there, but we never felt like we needed to address that because it's such a dumb conversation to have in the first place. But yet, here we are, and this is the world that we live in today. Gates, we're out of time, my friend. I love it. Where can people find your podcast?
I am on Instagram at X at Gates Garcia FL. FL is in Florida, the Free State, and you can find me on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, iHeart at the We the People Show.
All over the place. Go check it out. We the People Podcast. Also, you can find all your work on The Blaze as well at theblaze.com. Gates, it's great to talk to you, my friend. Good luck. Keep up this fight. It is so needed. We got to get you back on and do it again soon, brother.
Anytime, Andy. God bless.
Hey, appreciate it. You as well. Again, Gates Garcia with The Blaze and the We the People podcast. Go and check it out. Great content. We'll break some of that down and get your thoughts on it and more when we come back. One segment left as we wrap things up for a Monday here on The Voice of Reason.
This is The Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier. America's safe space for common sense. This is The Voice of Reason with Andy Hoosier.
So for the first time in many years, we'll slash the cost of prescription drugs, and we will bring fairness to America. Drug prices will come down by much more, really, if you think 59. If you think of a drug that is sometimes 10 times more expensive, it's much more than the 59%. It depends on the way you want to analyze it, but in one way you could analyze it that way. But between 59 and 80, and I guess even 90%. So when I worked so hard in the first term, and if I got prices down, remember I was the only one to ever get prices down for a full year, but I'd get them down like 2%, and I thought it was like a big deal. Well, we're getting them down.
Yeah, that's pretty dramatic. So President Trump making that announcement today before he heads off. I just want to get this straight. And again, it's been a wild couple of days, wild weekend trying to recap and trying to follow everything the Trump administration's been doing. But over the past 100 days, now that we're just over officially the 100-day mark here, we've been able to stop, apparently, a conflict with India and Pakistan. That happened over the weekend. Didn't even know there was a conflict there. Apparently, there's been skirmishes off and on since the 1940s when India became its own entity. Great Britain walked away from it, and it wasn't under the purview or umbrella of them. So there's been skirmishes for a while, but apparently they did a ceasefire late Friday night into Saturday morning. And apparently it happened after the nation of Pakistan had attacked India, or a city within India, and attacked tourists in the area, and now they have the ceasefire. So that was a win for the Trump administration. Then we have the announcement today from Donald Trump during his press conference that we have a peace agreement and a ceasefire, not a peace agreement, but at least a ceasefire with the Houthi rebels in the Middle East, which have been constantly shooting and trying to attack American military that's over there. Now that's a ceasefire. We'll see how long that lasts. We'll see if they actually fulfill their obligation of not attacking American soldiers, but we'll see. Another victory for us there. We have now the big news that leads us to
what's trending today.
This movement of apparently Thursday, a personal one-on-one physical sit-down with Vladimir Putin and Volodymyr Zelensky of Russia and the Ukraine. Sitting down, and the way this came about as well. Donald Trump, why it's our responsibility? I don't know, but apparently it is our responsibility. So it's our responsibility to create a ceasefire in Russia and the Ukraine. They're both, one's an ally, one's a trading partner, and we work with both of them. But why it's up to us to deal with this, I don't really know. But again, Donald Trump is now being held responsible to actually create the ceasefire. So he's been pushing him. Volodymyr Zelensky in Ukraine agrees to some type of peace deal. Vladimir Putin has not done so yet. And during the pushings this weekend, Vladimir Putin said, fine, let's have a sit down this weekend on Thursday, apparently, coming up in a couple of days, and let's do it. Not thinking that Ukraine would agree to it. Volodymyr Zelensky making the announcement today that he's willing to sit down and do that meeting in, I believe, Turkey on Thursday. So now, bombshell big victory for the Trump administration. All that while making the announcement today of bringing pharmaceutical prices down anywhere between 16 to 90% in the United States. And it's not just the insulin, but it's really every pharmaceutical pill that's out there, every pharmaceutical shot, every medication that we need as Americans. Donald Trump's done all of that in 100 days. And in fact, everything that we just mentioned in a 3-day period for the weekend. So and
I think we're going to make it big league.
That's a lot. So looking at, and thanks again to Gates Garcia coming on the program in that last segment, it really does drive home what is the platform of the Democrat Party. And with this wokeism and these identity politics they like to play, that's all they have. And it's going to crumble because it's kind of ridiculous. And now, like you said, we now have our side. We have Angel Studios, and we have these books for children, and we are talking about the culture, and we're talking about, the religious aspect and the family values and the biology of men and women. And it's so stupid that we have to have those conversations. At the same time, though, it's encouraging because we found our Achilles heel. Democrats were winning on the culture war for the longest time because we didn't know how to respond to it. We started to do all of these other things. Donald Trump created peace in the first term. He started to bring down pharmaceutical prices. He started to get the economy back on track. We became energy independent. He did all of that in the first administration, but we had a weak point. And that weak point was the cultural issue, was the identity politics, because you and I, we think it's so dumb to have that conversation. We didn't know how to engage it because we would look at them with glossy eyes. Be like, are we really doing this? Are we really having this conversation? But that's what they wanted to focus on, and they started to win. Now we're getting it back, and we are having the conversation that's deepening people's faith again. It's reinvigorating the family values again, the family unit again, and it's challenging them on the most basic form of reality that there is, and it's starting to crumble. Their cracks in their wall is starting to fall down. We are now circling them the 7 times, blowing our horns, and the walls of Jericho are going to collapse, man, because Democrats have nothing else, and it was based on lies and falsehoods in the first place. Back at it again tomorrow. We'll see you on the radio. Bye.